we couldn't just leave you like we left you. We had to come back, mostly because we're not ready to say goodbye. And we have a wrap-up show to do, myself and Dave Davis. I'm Trev Downey. This is, of course, Anfield Index, and you're watching our YouTube channel or wherever the hell you're watching or listening. You're very welcome. It's lovely to have you along. And what we've decided to do is go back over with quite a smug face the business of the transfer window, knowing that it's going to be a kind of pleasant chat for us as Liverpool supporters. Thinking of all the new Liverpool players that we have to choose from, including the absolute marquee signing that came in at the death. Yes, we can express our minor frustration and kick the dirt around a little bit about the one that got away right at the death. But, you know, how angry can we be? However, it's always going to be interesting to look at, compare and contrast how we did against other teams as well, especially our rivals and those across Europe who may be rivaling us for that particular pot. So without any further ado, welcome back to Dave, who's going to get the ball rolling, man. Just before we do, it is absolutely worth doing this, isn't it? There's a lot to kind of recap.
Yeah, to be honest, in the best possible way, it was a brilliant window for us. We had drama right at the death into the deal sheet overtime as well. But so did 90% of the Premier League, to be honest, didn't they? There was deals happening, right? Even ones that have only got ratified sort of today or the last few days. So I genuinely think we haven't seen a window like this before. And someone's probably going to correct us and say, what about the summer of 2007, blah, blah, blah. But just in terms of the amount of big deals that got done right at the deadline and all the way through, and the Premier League dominating as well, just unprecedented.
The Premier League dominating is really the takeaway. And as the biggest club in the Premier League, it was lovely to see us swinging those big old metaphorical you-know-whats and absolutely insisting on our dominance, on our big dog status. I really don't care if that sort of imagery rubs people the wrong way. You've had the same as I've had, a long old career of supporting this club that we love and watching us act like small time players in this market on a regular basis, always being the bridesmaids and never the bride. And here we are, Bridezilla. We have gone Bridezilla, Dave. And it's fantastic. It's just such an enjoyable thing. And like, if for only that reason, this show is worth doing, so we can reflect on all the good things. Can we get the ball rolling by looking at what was, remarkably enough, after the Wirtz saga and all the money that was spent on that man, the biggest story of the summer window that went right down to the wire? You know, Sky were absolutely gleefully rubbing themselves for the whole of the day and night because they got some drama on deadline day. It wasn't reduced to purple dildos and fellas' ears. It was an actual big story with all sorts of scandal around it. And we are now the proud owners of the contract of Alexander Isak, Dave.
This was brilliant, wasn't it? Like, even the fact it went down to a deal sheet and there's talk of, you know, they had to get Vissa to run and sign a signature so Newcastle would allow it, which was, of course, absolutely nonsense. We knew it was going to happen, but it just kind of punctuated into the drama. There was almost 3 acts with this, even into the deal sheet, because we had this, and then obviously it was punctuated by Marc Guehi, and maybe for the last time we will see Michael Corleone, Godfather 3 on the steps, because that did leave us with a bit of a...
It did.
Just sort of rocking a bit. But we thought, give us the dopamine hit. And literally about 9:15, they tweeted that, didn't they? From the club official account with the number 9 seat. And we were like, yes, we're here for the naughty stuff. And then 9:30, look at that for a photo, Trev. The interview as well. Everything about it. That even that question where just one was like deadpan, he looks down the camera and he's talking to Liverpool interview going, you know, what he focused on, winning everything, just everything. Like, we're not here to play second place. We're here for everything. We're here to take over everything. It was absolutely brilliant. Liverpool have got the best 9 in the league. And you're right, Sky still did their whole, that Carve nonsense as well. He's not the British record signing. He's a very naughty boy type of thing, and all, trying to be like holier than thou and all that nonsense, ignoring that 5 other players also have done it during this window. But absolutely brilliant. And there's some good stuff that's come out of it since, even the Athletic piece about it. It was interesting just to read that this went up to ownership level. It's almost like when in a big company, there's two people who are normal employees that can't resolve it. So they kick it up to their managers, don't they? And they maybe have a chat, but they can't resolve it. So the area directors get involved and they can't resolve it. Then the board of directors are maybe at senior level having a little bit of chat and thinking, hold on, that's not resolving it still. So we best go FSG, PIF. And that is really important to say, because as much as we're here to talk about Liverpool football and all sorts of things, that's just one of their many interests, isn't it? And there is that business relationship, it's important to say, between the PIF and FSG, which was really needed to be called upon in this situation as well. But alas, to be honest, with everything that happened, I'm not really sure we cared too much. We ended this window with Alexander Isak alongside Hugo Ekitike as our number 9 options. No one dreamed of that at the start of the window. So to put a little full stop at the end with Alexander Isak, absolutely sensational, Trev.
Yeah, the only ones who dreamed of it were the lads who owned the contract for Isak, and they thought they could add Ekitike. Sorry, lads. Looks like we may have done you up like a kipper there. But it's interesting that you mentioned that interview, and I found that to be quite affecting as well. That little, I want to win everything, and the dead silence afterwards. I could have run through a wall for the man at that point. It's like, this is all we want from the lad that signed for us. Look, we'll be accused of being one-eyed, and it doesn't really matter what we do. That's going to happen. True. But I feel like a lot has come out in the aftermath. A lot has come out in the aftermath, which I think will colour people who are a little bit open to being persuaded that Alexander Isak isn't the devil himself, and that Liverpool aren't, the devil's club. And that, in fact, when you look at how things are supposed to operate, with everyone doing the right thing and smiling and being nice, you get a Marc Guehi situation. And it's not even just as simple as that either. It's not that simplistic thing. As you say, this goes all the way to the very top levels. And at some point, there's an awful lot of people doing an awful lot of talking, Dave. We saw it with Glasser, and we'll get to that. There are different levels, and people have different opinions at those levels. When it really counted, the boys at the top said, no, we're taking in this vast quantity of money for this asset. Thank you very much. That's what they did. Now, there was a little bit of a twist in the final amount that has gotten all sorts of people. As you know, we've been covering it all summer. There's people who are, I think, genuinely clueless. There are people who are deliberately clueless and this acting in a very disingenuous way. And then there are straight up misinformation stirrers as well. What was the little, for people who aren't familiar with it, the 125 versus 130? As I understand it, it was to do with the player himself deciding not to cash in all his chips and therefore saving Newcastle some money. And therefore it stands on the overall amount, and yet it's not an amount that Liverpool have to pay out. There was a specific term that was being used. Maybe walk people through that technical aspect of the deal.
Yeah, Liverpool have literally put down, or will put down, 125 million quid for Alexander Isak. That is the amount Liverpool will pay. What's important to say, exactly as you mentioned there, to obviously facilitate this, Isak and his team have foregone a lot of bonuses, haven't they, and options for payment. So as it's phrased, for a solidarity payment, Newcastle are almost taking that as the mini win, aren't they? That they don't have to pay Isak his bonuses, and some of this money goes to Gothenburg, I think it is, Sociedad, it is former clubs that way. So they're kind of taking that as a mini win. And to be fair, I'm not going to begrudge them too much, because people forget when we, the summer of 66, when we sold him, I think it was 8.3 million was the actual amount. But because we saved, I think, about 1.7 million on wages over the period in the back pay, we classed it as a 10 million transfer, didn't we? So it's a little bit to be fair, in that regard, like that for them overall. So, yeah, that was the key. I mean, 125 million in a summer where Luke Edwards said he's not for sale. Then it was 150 million, whatever, to 125 million on deadline day. Liverpool won it all.
I don't know if you want to comment on it or not, if you think it'll come up later or not, but there's been quite a lot of interesting interweb beef going on with Mr. Edwards, who, let's be honest, has done a fine job of making himself look quite the tit. And it's not, I actually had one or two Liverpool fans who follow me when I posted something semi-critical about something he had said. And I was always critical, Dave, of the tone, the condescending, aggressive tone.
Totally.
And that's all that really bothered me. If you have information you want to put out there, even if you want to be a complete shill, or if you want to be, like some of those extreme Geordie accounts that we saw, those guys don't bother me in the slightest. I would never get upset by them. They're like the Geordie equivalent of a Craig chap. I don't care. Just you shout into the internet. It's fine. Do you? But this guy was condescending, and he was vaguely threatening, and he continued to be so.
Yeah.
And then tried to reinvent reality and cast it through some sort of prism where he himself was always right and told you so. And if he was wrong, then he was right, and you were wrong for thinking he was wrong. And it round and round we went. And I just feel a little bit like some people, like our own Gibbo, who found himself on the sharp end of some of Edwards' caustic and completely scurrilous commentary. Sam Maguire equally, who found himself on the end of, I think, borderline threatening commentary, which is weird. It just feels as if someone needs to take a step backwards here. It's not the lads affiliated with our channel.
Yeah, there's so much to it, like you said, like the things that Gibbo put on, which just actually proved to be correct time after time as well, and what came up. And there's a little part of me, and I mean it's the little part, the little tiny Machiavellian bit buried deep, does kind of respect Luke Edwards for never changing his tone, even in the face of blatant, overriding factual evidence, like there's a little bit of me respects that rather than just done a full turncoat type of thing. I'm begrudgingly respectful. And also, I've got to say this for the record, in 99.99% of occasions, anyone that wants to criticise and slag off Sam Maguire on Twitter has my full support and backing. I've got to say that naturally. However, on this occasion, and it is annoying to say, Sam again was proven right time and time again. And he mentioned this to us, as we said on the last show, in November, well ahead of the, not trying to be derogatory, but 87 million ITKs who've claimed the exclusive on this. So that is important to say. It's utterly bizarre. I mean, the interesting thing at the moment, and the latest, because I know it's completed, but this bit's still alive, is there was reports, wasn't there, saying that Isak and his agency were considering legal action based on comments that he'd almost not wanted or not tried to qualify for the Champions League, hadn't they? And that element, so that's an ongoing thing. We'll see if there's anything in that. But I don't know, the one bit I think I am looking forward to of the finishing of this transfer window is we don't have to keep an eye on Newcastle's business anymore because it doesn't affect us. Hopefully, Luke Edwards now does depart most Red fans' lives. And maybe we just don't get dragged into another saga. I'm saying maybe because we probably will at some point, but those are things we might not miss too much about all this.
For sure. We might as well cover the other sort of controversial story right at the start before we get into more general reflections on Liverpool, and that is the Marc Guehi thing. Now, as we were wrapping up our show at about 7:30, 7:40 the other evening, still nothing had happened, but there was the ominous signs coming through via Ornstein tweets about how it looked like it wasn't going to happen. Some of the stuff that's emerged since, Dave, is quite stunning. Now, I know you have been privy to one particularly wild story that's currently doing the rounds that we won't mention, but some of the ones that are doing the rounds that are available to everybody are just equally wild, including, it seems, a head man who was too busy doing his physical jerks at the local YMCA to bother getting down in time to finish his duties as the man who oversees deals, or should help there to oversee deals. It just feels as if the whole thing was a cataclysm of miscommunication at that club. I refuse to believe that it came down to some lad called Igor going to West Ham. Like, I'm not having that. It can't be that simple, Dave. The whole Glasner thing, if it doesn't, basically the story that's doing the rounds is that he basically held the club to ransom, that he would walk if Guehi left. It's all very weird, Dave. It's all very weird.
It really is just bizarre. And in true Michael Corleone style, because we thought this would be it for us, maybe the last show, but just when we think we're out, they pull us back in, Trev, with this type of thing, don't they? And yeah, I mean, Guehi, we said it on the show. Our information, which has borne out, was that Guehi was in the offices at Liverpool, wasn't he? Done his medical, been given the green light, just waiting literally for the rubber stamp, for want of a better phrase, of the deal, for that deal sheet. But as we said, and it's come out, basically Glasner played a bit of a game of chicken, didn't he, with Steve Parish that way, and won. Got his way to say, if Marc Guehi goes, I'm resigning. And that is what it is. And there's been recriminations, haven't there? And we've talked about this. It's nothing new, like they've lost out on 35 million. Will we go back in January? We'll get to that very shortly. Sometimes, though, there's things that just, I don't know if they should surprise you still, but they do when we've done so many of these. And it's this bit. There's this Sammy Mockbull article where it says the rug pulled from under it. And just for fairness and transparency, I know you might not be on YouTube watching this, but let me just read you this, people. Between 1:30 and 3 p.m, a club-to-club agreement had been concluded and Guehi was given permission by Palace to undergo his medical. Brilliant. At that moment, Guehi believed he was joining the Premier League champions, who were also about to confirm the capture of Alexander Isak for 125 million, and medical was over an hour long. But Parish did not sit down with Guehi and his advisors until after 6 p.m, following a fitness class at a gym in Soho. Of all the things I did not think I'd be reading about this transfer fail, if you want to call it that, it was just that. And it's been interesting because trying to do some digging around this is not trying to be directly derogatory of Steve Parish, because I'm not being funny. I think that line does a big job on him already, really, and, finishes it off a little bit. But as a lot of people around Palace are saying, there's two things. Number one, a lot of Palace fans, and I get this, they don't care too much about the 35 million. They wanted Marc Guehi to stay, and they see that as a win, and that's their right to, whatever they think about the financials. I get all that. The second thing that a lot of Palace, or people around Palace, are saying as well is Steve Parish's role in recruitment has increased for this window. It used to actually be Dougie Freeman, didn't it? Who used to be seen as the mastermind. Parish would run the club, sign off the checks, but he's had to take a bigger role this season. And things like that maybe just suggest that as good as Palace have been as a club, maybe Steve Parish isn't quite the master negotiator he's proven to be. And it almost feels a bit like, do you remember when Homer managed to get one over Mr. Burns on the power plant type of thing, and then he celebrates just by walking around on the floor going, whoop, 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 whoop. Maybe Steve Parish did that after his fitness class. Who knows a little bit. But all the little things that go into it, and it didn't go through. The only thing I do want to say is, because I know people have gone, we'll definitely go back in January. We'll definitely do that. If you ask me right now, I would lean towards that, Trev. Absolutely, because an England international potentially for 10, 15 million in January. Liverpool are not just going to walk by that, put it that way. However, by January, you don't know what the centre-back market will look like. Liverpool also were very clear to make out this was a market opportunity, weren't they, at the same time? So you don't... And we've said this on our transfer show. We knew Guehi was a market opportunity. It wasn't necessarily the top choice. So maybe the top choices could be available in January or the summer. There's the Ibu Konate scenario. Yes, we all suspect he leaves, of course, but there's just too much in the mix to go, it's definitely going to be January or go back. If you ask me to bet, I'd put money on it, but I wouldn't put the house in that regard. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see what develops. But of all the things I thought we'd be talking about in a wrap-up, a gym class in Soho was not on the agenda.
No, nobody saw that one coming. And it is interesting because I can see there's a certain level of interest in the chat panel on this about, do we go back in? So you're absolutely spot on to address. And I think obviously the relationship has been established. The player has shown a great intent to want to join Liverpool. I don't think there would be rivals in the Premier League, even if they offered maybe more money, because I think that relationship has been established now. We've shown that we clearly want the lad. He's shown that he clearly wants the club. So I think that goes a long way to smoothing over whatever. I think it'll continue to be a wrangle over money, though. In January, I think they will continue to ask for something that we may not be willing to give. And who knows, maybe Glasner will dig his heels in again. So you're right. You're right also to point out that it may be done. And we may roll into next summer, and not only will we have to do something about the Guehi opportunity we missed out on, but we'll also have to address the breaking up of our massive partnership with Ibu possibly being on his bike. So it's very fluid now. I think the assumption that we go back in January is possibly a little bit presumptuous.
Yeah,
I think it's a bit presumptuous. There's so many things in play here. I'd love it, Dave. And
yeah,
I've seen people dress it up as, well, look, get Guehi for a title charge. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue with that.
No.
But it does seem, and it might be a good time for us to address it here. It does seem as if that's had. I've seen it suggested here by someone in the chat that it's had a knock-on effect, because the story is going around wild now as we speak. The Chiesa has been left out of the Champions League squad. I've been trying to check somewhere of repute on Twitter as you were talking. I can't find anywhere that's absolutely definitive, but there's so many people saying it that I'm inclined to believe that there must be something to it. And people are saying that, because we needed to include Leone now in that squad because we didn't get Guehi, that's why Chiesa is left out of that squad, and people are crying tears for him and his lack of involvement in the Champions League, and it continues to be a hard luck story for Chiesa. So these things are not simple, Dave. There's always knock-on effects.
No, and that is true. I think in the 22-man, I think people have jumped a little bit and gone like, the rage hit. Slot never fancied him. He sold him a lie. It was all a con, all this type of thing. I think, as you alluded to there, he has been left out, but it does more seem to be around the homegrown element and how many they can include and the rules around that someone had to sort of bite the bullet on that a little bit. It is a shame as well, because you think for Chiesa, you hope we obviously win the games, but if we've already qualified against the likes of carry a bag at home and things like that, that feels a great time to have used him, didn't it, at the same time? But yeah, there you go. I think someone saying 8 homegrown, mix of 4 England trained, 4 club trained in the rules. So I think the rules, rather than a lack of faith in Chiesa, have just bit that one.
It seems that way. And that actually does kind of make a disappointing sense, you have to say. But to retrain our eyes back on the prize that is the window, we did have a big out. Now, I heard some talk about this today, and you'll have to explain it for me and for others, because I was listening earlier on to the Daily Red, and Dave was talking about how we will get this money in for Harvey Elliott, and it's banked for next season, because initially, I think we're looking at a season loan with a what's the word? Not compulsion to buy. Yeah, it is compulsion. Obligation to buy. There you go. And it's one of those deals where we have all the little sweeteners that we usually put in terms of buybacks and sell-ons and all the rest of it. And you and I have a fanciful idea that we also have a gentleman's agreement with relation to Morgan Rogers. what do you make of this deal for Harvey Elliott? Because I remember talking to you on Monday night and saying, that's not the pot of money that people will have expected. And yes, all these other mitigating factors will absolutely come into play. But it does feel like we could have milked a few more shekels out of some other source, which is why I'm inclined to believe these stories about Morgan Rogers or keeping Villa sweet for some other reason.
Yeah, I mean, you can't avoid it. It's been the tale all summer that's been coming out that for Harvey Elliott, it was either 40 million and a buyback or 50 million, wasn't it? Straight up deal if there was no clauses. And we kept getting told that you looked at the moves for the likes of Hutchinson, Diblin. That was where Liverpool saw him in that market. And then all of a sudden, it comes out that he's going to Aston Villa. But hold on, exactly as you said, it's a loan. But it's a loan with an obligation. And as comes out later on, when we go into deal sheet territory, there's 2 clauses in there, isn't there? Not just one. There's a buyback and there's a sell-on clause at the same time as well. So you just thought, okay, lower but 2 clauses. And also, as you alluded to there, there's all hope we're playing a bit of the long game, a bit with Crystal Palace as well, why we're not kicking up too much of a fuss somewhat, thinking that, okay, wouldn't mind Adam Wharton, would we, down the line? So we want to keep that sweet. Definitely wouldn't mind Morgan Rogers down the line as well. And also Villa had to do this, didn't they, because of the nature of their issues. And that's why Jadon Sancho was a loan. That's why Victor Lindelof was the other headline on a free. So we've just pacified Crystal Palace. And now we've just given a bit of a sweetener, haven't we, to Aston Villa to help them. Almost like, in true Godfather style, that day and that day may never come. I will call upon you for a service type of thing. So, yeah, for the not a funeral director involved this time. So maybe it is just a smart bit of business, number one. And number two, how impressed are you? I've got 3 Godfather references in this podcast already.
Dude, I was literally just about to say it. I feel under pressure now. I'm going to have to work something in before the end. Yeah, tremendous stuff. And it's good to get it sort of talked out and get all the details on the board for people as well, so they can kind of get their heads around why it may have happened the way it's happened. Because one thing you'd have to say that we do well and we've done well, and we're going to talk about it now really, is sell players. And this is not a new thing. This is going back to, recent seasons and seasons, not quite a way back, Jordan Ibe and the like. I'm thinking about how we have wrung money out of players that, I mean, even let's be honest, Dave. Let's be straight up honest about this. There were obviously lunatics saying that we should get £30 million for the lad who now has 2 names instead of 1.
Yeah.
But he had played no minutes for Liverpool Football Club. And we get 25 of your English pounds. That'll do me, man. That's a great deal that we did. And you have in front of us right now a sort of a summary of the transfer spending. Do you want to walk us through some of the big highlights of that? People can zoom in if they want.
Yeah, I mean, this, absolutely. And I'll just see, ladies and gents, if I can sort of ping it in for you. I might not be able to, unfortunately, on that. But the key bit for this is you look at Liverpool, it's both columns. Yes, people and your rival fans are going to jump on the spending, like we said last show. Look at that for the amount we've sold this window. And that's a Sky Sports graphic which says fees include potential add-ons and excludes undisclosed fees. 228 million. And Joycey actually in his tweet went higher, that if you include last summer, where we only really bought Chiesa for a pittance, didn't we, over these last sort of 2 summers, Trev, it could go to 328 million quid Liverpool have sold. Like, absolutely extraordinary. And just to give you an idea for anyone that might mock that or dismiss that, there's other clubs who are rivals who are not even on the horizon or a speck of dust in comparison to that. The only other one, and I'm saying this because it's just funny and we should bring Sweeney Todd into a little bit, is Chelsea, who officially have sold 314 million. But remember, officially, Sweeney Todd has sold 5 players to himself this window, including Ben Chilwell going to Australia, and all the deals they make with other clubs. So we'll just not say too much on that. But the bit, I mean, that is absolutely fantastic business. We did great buying and great selling this window. And there's 3 real stars of this window for us, isn't there, in terms of, which they shouldn't be forgotten. Richard Hughes, who was pillared last window, and, people criticize it. And we have to be honest and say, like, what is going on a little bit in terms, you've got to be honest in what's happened. But it's a full turnaround. What a window he has had in terms of, even with Isak starting the groundwork, Vert getting those done. Absolutely brilliant. Arne Slot as well, Trev. Arne Slot was never predicted to be the headline grabber, like a Slot WhatsApp or a visit to the Donkeys at Blackpool. But it's come out all summer, all these top players saying, the call with Arne Slot swayed me. Yep. Others who we didn't get, like Cherky, who Arne Slot went over to see just to tell him, we don't really want you, lad, to be honest. We're getting Verts. I just thought I'd fly over and tell you, type of thing. But just an absolute star player in this market now as well. And as much as credit is being given to Richard Hughes, and it's kind of funny that John Henry's tweeted this in the chat panel, more Michael Edwards telling Masterclass. This is crucial. We've said this to you since early May. Michael Edwards has been leading the sales element and all this, the Saudi relationship and other things. Don't discount that, because there's maybe a sliding doors moment where if FSG had bought, another club and gone to the multi-club model, Michael Edwards' glances would have been taken another way, wouldn't they, to have set that up, do what he wants to do longer term. But because he's been here, there's not been a multi-club and he's been all over the selling. I do think that's played a big part in the success of the window. So don't, as much as it's not doing down Richard Hughes, don't ignore that Edwards effect and the fact he's still there in the background pulling the strings. But from head coach, director of football, head of global operations, what a summer to have bought the players in they've bought in, but what a summer to recoup that money at the same time.
Do you remember the days when we used to have our sole superstar in the form of Stevie Gerrard WhatsApping guys and sending them a MySpace message and say, hey, would you like to, our sole superstar? That's how we used to do business. Now it's lads knocking down the door to get to Liverpool. And I think, people can be as dismissive as they like. Yeah, the club has been on top in the Klopp era, but it's only really now post-Klopp, if we're being perfectly honest, that the destination club thing is finally here. And we've proved that by busting records back to back, bringing in our new 7 and our new 9. Now, we have to mention this today. Mo Salah out, absolutely killing in the streets today, Dave, when he decided to jump all over, I think, we'll leave them nameless, a fan site who decided to talk about the best upgrade they've ever seen. And they had a picture of Lucho and a picture of Darwin and a picture of our 2 new 7 and 9 side by side. And to be fair, they have a point, right? There's no two ways about it. They have a point. But Mo absolutely slapped them down, as I think is right. You and I wouldn't have tweeted something like that. It just seems disrespectful to 2 lads who did a lot. Even if you weren't a Darwin fan, he contributed to a league title. Lucho undoubtedly did. And it just seemed a little bit tasteless. Mo in 2-footed right at their heads. And then everyone's piled on since, including myself. I've had a great time with it. And like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? When you see your star player coming out and doing something like that, it makes it okay. But you know what? The objective reality of the 7 to 9 upgrade in both cases, it's fucking wild, Dave. Like, I want to acknowledge that was out of order, but I also want to acknowledge that going from Lucho to Florian Wirtz is objectively an upgrade, and going from Darwin to Isak is objectively an upgrade, and we are objectively, therefore, better. This is exciting, man. It's really, really exciting. In that simplistic way, it's really exciting.
I think people sometimes struggle with, I think, context in certain bits that it can all be true, can't it? It can be a classless, tasteless tweet at the same time, whilst being correct that players have been upgraded in positions. Both things can be right. Yeah, you're right. It was right that I love the fact actually that Mo sort of waded in and showed I would call it his more leadership qualities, isn't he? The skills that he has there, and the ability to stand for the group there. I like that, and it was right that players who played a big part in that success were recognised. Your word's right, though. It's just wild. The fact that if you had asked us at the start of the summer, will £100 million plus player arrive at Liverpool? We'd have been like, John Henry style, what are they smoking over there at Anfield Index type of thing? So not just to have that once, not just to have that twice, for Hugo Ekitike, who could reach 80 million quid by the sound of it, all things in, to be the third highest signing of the summer. People wouldn't have even thought, because someone had said to you at the start, Liverpool's top spend will be about 80 million. You'd go, maybe, there'd have to be sales, wouldn't they? So it is just absolutely wild what's happened this summer. Even just pinging around 30 million on a right back, who might not be first choice, 40 million on a left back, who will be first choice, but just that amount in the first place, backup keeper coming in, and, all those types of things in the mix. I mean, an 18-year-old, yes, he looks a beast, but we're not sure how much he's going to be used. You'd think when you spend 26 million and we hear the beckoning and the fanfare for him, he will be. But that's at the bottom end of the scale, isn't it? A £26 million transfer in everything we've done. It has just been brilliant, but a wild summer completely.
It has. And I just want to clarify one thing. I kind of drove the bus in that direction and then derailed you. The PSR thing, there's a huge amount of ignorance around how it works. And again, most of it is in that lazy category, and then an awful lot of it is sort of mischief, if we're being honest, Dave, and people coming up with things just to be saying to have headlines. And if you were curious about how it works, today's Daily Red does a good breakdown where Dave goes through how it works in a 3-year cycle, and people don't seem to get that. And it works in a 3-year cycle, and therefore you have to look at business over that period. And whereas we have done a lot of buying this summer, we've also done a lot of effective selling. And therefore our net spend is less than Arsenal's. So for all that we have lashed out this summer and people accusing us of buying the league, this is the Liverpool who spent 10 million last summer buying the league. The net spend being less than Arsenal does actually make me chuckle, dude. It really does.
It's just brilliant. And I think we've said it before on this show. I think sometimes people can get lost in PSR, but if you just keep it simple, like you said, it runs in 3-year cycles. You're only allowed to lose so much over that 3-year cycle at the same time as well. And what clubs may do at times is have a low spending year, i.e. last summer, because it gives them headroom, doesn't it, in the next year when we move into another year for the 3-year cycle, which is exactly what we did. This summer goes back to last summer and a bit before in the planning by when Michael Edwards comes back into the club. So we have just been so smart. And I think like that graphic, if you think it's just nonchalant or you throw it away and we've bought the league, that graphic tells me, and we'll talk about other teams as well, how badly other teams sell compared to how well we do it at the same time. This has just been a brilliant summer across the board.
It's worth people freeze frame or zooming in, have a look at that little table of the transfer spending this summer, and it is about how poorly Arsenal have sold, or else we'd be way out on our own even with the net spend because of how much we have actually out spent in gross. But you've got United there with 170 net spend, but what's wild is you've got people like Sunderland who have 141, and you can see why. You understand why clubs do this, but then they get themselves in trouble, and then there's knock-on effects, and before you know it, it's the cycle of down we go again and waiting for the next little balloon payment and round. And it just feels like over the 3-year cycle, there has been clever business done by Liverpool, which, we're like, I would say we might be flirting with the levels now as things stand. But what people need to remember as well, and this is what I meant to say to you, was the Harvey Elliott deal, because it is currently a loan, that won't go onto the books as profit for us until next time out.
Yeah.
And when it does, that's us getting a 35 million head start on that window. So
Absolutely.
It's just clever business, Dave.
Yeah, it is. It's a clever business. And it always goes back to almost a line from many years ago that when Klopp and Edwards were first working together in conjunction, and there was that, I say the interview, but that article that came out when it was first really talked about, and Michael Edwards first came to, I suppose, public prevalence rather than just within the game, that Michael Edwards always planned, didn't he? Not just one, but 3 windows ahead was the standard practice. And that is what has been going on, that planning for the future. Almost that, yes, we've seen it all come to its magnificence in this window, but it starts a long time before that.
And that is why I think Guehi is another factor, and why I think Guehi will come. I think it's likely because I think he was part of that. Okay, so we start to ease him in as we're easing maybe Virgil out, and we're taking Leone along. That kind of succession planning. If you think that's not happening at our club, then you have not been paying attention.
No.
It's very, very interesting to watch. Is there anything left with Liverpool, or have we pretty much wrung the tea towel dry at this stage?
I think so. I suppose I don't think it will happen, but as you know, there's been reports about Marc Guehi considering his options, and that's been coming from the Palace end, hasn't it, a little bit as well? And we've heard some wild suggestions. You may have heard them, the same people. I suppose the only thing I'm thinking on that is I don't think it will happen, because Marc Guehi is, in terms of his character, as we know, quite grounded, won't want to rock the boat too much. Still might not have a love for the owners at Palace, but the football club and the fans is a different thing. And as is also coming out in reports, Liverpool are looking to pacify that relationship with Palace a little bit as well, maybe in terms of what they're looking at. So maybe something will happen. There was talk of Marc Guehi putting out a statement, wasn't there? But I don't think it'll come to that, because at the end of the day, it makes more sense just to get his head down and see where it is in 6 months' time.
So for what we have left of the show, let's take a look, first of all, at our Premier League rivals and maybe not so rivals. And we'll finish off with a chat about Arsenal and City and United and Forest and a few others. But let's just start with the goalkeeper scenario in Manchester, because there's a bit of there's a bit of moving and shaking going on. We were still sort of uncertain as the show is ending on Monday. We're in the deal sheet territory, but stuff has happened. Talk to us about the goalkeeper scenario in the 2 Manchester clubs.
Yeah, 3 moves in Manchester, wasn't there? Donnarumma comes in. That was finally done as was suspected. That went to the deal sheet. And Edison went to Turkey, didn't he? Fenerbahce. So 1 in, 1 out there. And I think it's interesting. We mentioned this, and a lot of City fans have been the same. He's not the best with his feet, Donnarumma, is he? He's quite an opposite to what you'd think a Pep goalkeeper would be. But you just wonder if Pep's gone, we are that bad in defending, I'll just put the giant bear in goal type of thing and just see if that helps a little bit. Maybe that comes into it. Manchester United get the Belgian youngster. I think it's Salmons. He's in net. Emi Martinez. He turned out to be the Peter Odemwingie, didn't he, of this window, where everyone thought he was going to leave. You know, he talked to loads of clubs, but he goes back to Aston Villa a little bit with his tail between his legs. So that will be interesting. Also, though, City, for all the business they did, it was all departures late on, wasn't it? Excuse me. He had Akanji. He went on loan to Inter. And Gundogan, even today, he goes back to his native Turkey, doesn't he, to Galatasaray. And we will talk about Turkey because they're an important nation in this. But yeah, a lot of departures. A lot happened at the Manchester clubs. Maybe again, despite all the money spent, not as much as they wanted. And it was still funny. The final thing to say over Manchester, I mean, Anthony went to Betis for a pittance that got confirmed as well. United genuinely thought they would get Carlos Baleba for around 70 million quid. That is just a funny way to finish the Manchester business.
It is. And equally funny to me was what looked like the most performative crying I've ever seen by Emi Martinez at the end of the game. That was, is it just me, or did that look actually put on like, hey, I'm leaving, guys, and then it ends up exploding in his face, like you said, pure Peter Odom wingy stuff. That's going to be an awkward one. That's an awkward dressing room to go back into. But anyway, you reap what you sow in that regard. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Donnarumma is like in goal for City. I have to say, I'm curious about it. We'll move into the rest of the Premier League sort of sum up by talking about Forest. And then we'll move to Arsenal as well, and just maybe have a look in general at how they've done. But just there's a few bits going on at Forest there.
Do you know what? We said at the start of the window and halfway through, we couldn't expect what they gave us the other window. Do you remember when they signed about 87,000 players in that sort of first year? Like we knew that wasn't going to happen. But with about a month left to go, we were almost flagging them as our biggest disappointment, weren't we, a little bit? As in, like, they're not really done too much. But it's important to say, even in the deadline day and the last 2 weeks or so of the window, Forest bought in 7 players. So Forest had a real sort of splurge right to the end. And even on deadline day, they missed out on the Atletico Madrid left-back. I can't remember his name. But Nkape goes to Arsenal. That gets done. And they get in the man on screen, don't they? Zinchenko. So they finally get a left-back in. They also get a boy from Strasbourg called Bakwa, I think it's pronounced. So that happens. They did a lot of business late on Forest. It is interesting, though, just to mention on Forest, they lost the last game, didn't they, before the transfer window closed? They got beat at home by West Ham, of all teams, who have had a stinker, and Graham Potter was potentially on the rack. It is just worth noting tonight that a lot of bookies have got Nuno as favourite to be the next manager to go. So despite all those signings, a lot of it still seems to reverberate around Edu now being the lead there. Did Nuno want all these? Did he want other? We're not quite sure how it's working. But for all the new boys coming in, the manager who got them Europe last season might just be departing. One to keep an eye on.
Absolutely, it will be. So Edu's the main man there. He had been at Arsenal, yes.
Yeah.
And Arsenal are speaking in glowing terms of their current setup, because why wouldn't you be if you spend $1 billion over the short tenure of a manager's spell at the club? What did you make of their overall business? And does the Hincapié over the line in the end really elevate it to a different level? I mean, we must be honest. He is a lad we'd have loved at Liverpool.
Yeah, it's no doubt about that. I would have loved him at Liverpool. Absolutely. I thought it would have been a great signing. You know, we talked about this before, multifunctional things we could do. And also, if you think, the fact that he seems to tuck Kirkes in a lot at the moment, doesn't he, and having almost alongside Van Dijk, you know, would have been perfect for that, it seems. But alas, not to be. The one thing I can't get over with Arsenal is, for the money spent, you thought, what did they need? They needed a top forward. That was clear. Is Gyökeres that? I think he'll be ultimately the tail of their summer, isn't he? I think Gyökeres has got 20 goals in him, just to be clear, but flat track bully 20 goals, if that makes sense. I mean, he didn't really offer anything against us, did he? United away the opening day. Don't really think he did much there. He kind of strikes me as one who could get 2 at home against Burnley, you know, 2 at home against that type of 20-goal striker. So is he enough? Eze was the other sort of big one there. But I'm a big fan of him. I think he's a fantastic footballer. But again, almost plays in the half space between left wing and 10, doesn't he? And you think, is he going to work with Odegaard because of the spaces he likes to occupy? How is that all going to knit together? Is it the positions you thought? Yes. Is it the players you thought complement it best? I'm not so sure. And then the third and final thing for Arsenal, Trev, despite all this, despite all those attacking options, he goes to Anfield and he just picks his biggest lineup, doesn't he? He picks what's the biggest lineup I can put on the field, and I will keep it tight. And to be honest, I was at this game and people were saying it in the car. Arsenal are just boring, aren't they? They're just side to side, no risk taken at all. It's all, we'll play not to lose, we'll try and nick a set piece. That is the tactics, despite spending £1 billion. And ultimately, the question it comes down to is, all that money spent, can you win the Premier League playing that way, with that style, with these recruits? I'm not sure they can. So for Arsenal's summer, maybe it's still going to be punctuated by who's in charge of it all.
What did you think of the contribution of Madueke the other day? Because I found that really indicative of how people were seeing the game. People who were sort of either Liverpool bad or with a slant against Liverpool were talking about his amazing performance and how he kept running at Kirkaz and he gave him a torrid time. Whereas I was very hyper aware of Kirkaz and watching his performance and thinking, lad, you need to step it up big time, which he did against Madueke. He, yes, was to the pin of his collar. Yes, he conceded a lot of corners, but the guy got no crosses over. He just had him, if not in his pocket, then pretty much on lockdown. I thought it was a great performance from our man. And it makes me wonder where he plays when Saka comes back, because I don't think it's a long-term injury for him at all. So I think you're right. I think they will have maybe trouble shuffling the pack now. It's a nice tough at the top headache though, Dave, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. And you're right. I think everyone likes to say, oh, I think the phrase is Madueke cooked Kirkaz, but when you look at it, he really didn't, did he? He didn't I think the one shot he actually got off, Kirkaz makes a diving block actually to knock it over for a corner. That when you look at the dual stats, Kirkaz won. When you look at the overall score, Kirkaz won. Was there ever a moment where you thought Madueke's got him on toast or whatever modern phrase you want to use? No. I just think Arsenal, they've got more options and it's a squad with depth. But is there any really that frighten you? Limited few, like Saka, who's injured at the moment. Are their attacking options as good as ours? Not a chance.
I think that's fair. And of course, the season will bear out whether we're talking through our hats or not. Is there anything else you want to do by way of a review of anyone else, any other club you think bears mention here in terms of just overall business, or one particular standout signing that got done late, or anything you want to mention at all here before we move to Europe?
I still think it's important to say Manchester City were a funny one, aren't they? Because people say, they've not spent much. Well, just ignore the fact that they blew 200 million quid in the January window, of course, and did that. Net spend of 90 million. But for all the players they've brought in, like Cherky, Reinders, and the legs in midfield going forward and attacking talent there, no doubt. And some big names have left, of course, like Gundogan, De Bruyne, who it was right to move on at this time. They still have that soft underbelly, don't they? And it's no coincidence that the world was eulogising after that Wolves. Do you remember the opening game where they're going to be the main rivals for us? They're going to do this. And what's happened, Trev? They've lost the last two in a row. They look a little bit soft still, don't they? And it seems to be that, I'm not saying Rodri isn't a talent because he was, Ballon d'Or winner, all these things, but he's had a massive injury like VVD, who, if you're honest, did take about a year or so to get back up to full speed, doesn't it? So everyone's just saying, it's fine, Rodri's going to come in sorted. I don't think it's going to be that straightforward. So for all the title rivals and this talk, Chelsea mentioned as well, this could well come back to bite me on the arse, but I do think it will be Liverpool and Arsenal as the top two this season. And there's been some good buys, but there's nothing I look at there that goes at the top end. It's troubling me at all. The only other thing to say, and we've mentioned it before, Sunderland net spend 141 million. Burnley net spend 66 million there as well. All your promoted teams have had a real go this summer, and I've got all the respect in the world for that. So, yeah, really mixed windows, but it counts on the pitch. We still won it.
It feels like that. And I think if you wanted to make it really graphic, you wanted to be really honest about it, you would simply ask the question of a level-headed, reasonable-minded fan of a different club, which would you prefer, our window or yours?
Yeah.
Nobody is going to say that they wouldn't want Liverpool. So let's hope that the fruits of that window are on display as the season pans out. And we should finish the show by looking around Europe. I know you want to get to Turkey at the end, so that's where we'll go last.
Yeah.
But for now, it is kind of fair to say that by comparison with the Premier League, it's been tame enough, hasn't it, around the big clubs in Europe?
I think that it's been a summer punctuated by, across world football, the Premier League has dominated in terms of money, transfers. I mean, there's still been some big moves like on the screen. Mastantuono, he is a Real Madrid player now, isn't he? In that regard, the Argentinian young superstar. I'll be interested to see how he does. Barcelona, who we've talked about for many moons. I mean, Marcus Rashford on loan. You know, that's the type of thing we're talking about there for them. It's not really overwhelming. Napoli, who won Serie A last season. I mean, Højlund and De Bruyne are the two biggest names really ending up there, who were discarded by United. And De Bruyne was always going to leave on a free. Even Bayern, I mean, they missed out after winger, didn't they? Or different players. They didn't get Florian Wirtz as well. End up with Luis Diaz, you know, who they're paying a hefty wage. So he's got what he wanted, and we got a good dollar for him as well. And Nicholas Jackson, do you know what I mean? A Chelsea cast-off. That's where Bayern are at, as they're almost back up forward. So I just think in terms of when you talk about Europe and how we've seen it historically, and yes, we can talk about Galacticos and different bits, and it might well change because football tends to work in cycles, as we know. But for this summer, Barca have tried to repair their finances a bit. Real Madrid have been focused on the stadium, you know, and all that project and building and money that way. Yes, I mean, they still bought, obviously, our former player on high freeze, and they might well do that in the next window as well. But the Premier League largely has been head and shoulders over the rest. And the biggest clubs in Europe, they've probably let us down a little bit this window, haven't they?
Feels like that. You know, I saw some stuff just before we moved to our last two stories, which are Saudi, and then we'll finish with Turkey. I saw some people mocking up images of Isak in a Real Madrid kit and saying, 3 years' time, if he does this. And like, it's so stupid. It's so unthinking, because everyone with a brain was replying it. Well, if he does that, we'll have won a few leagues and he'll have done brilliant pull-up trees for us. Yeah, we'll just take a huge amount of money off Real Madrid. Thanks very much. And you and I both know there's at least one player that we haven't really mentioned on this show because we don't want to talk about it. There's nothing official about it. We've talked about Ibu, but there's at least one. You don't have to be a genius to work out who it might be that might actually move to a big Spanish club as well. And it's unsettling, but you have the heart now that if we do lose someone from the midfield, we'll go and get a Wharton. If we do lose someone from the back line, we'll go and get a Guehi. It feels like we will just do business as we need to do to maintain the status of the club as it is. That's really heartening, Dave. It's a good place for us to be. I don't know if you want to comment on that. If you do, please do. But if not, let's move across to Saudi, because, Jesus, talk about a disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, wasn't it? I mean, from how this has shifted in terms of when it first came into our radar this 3 years ago, and it was the paradigm shifted and they were moving for Mbappe and all the big people to almost this window where you thought, what will they do? Because it's Club World Cup year, wasn't it? That happened and they wanted to make a splash there. And there wasn't even like a ripple effect, really, was there? Was just practically nothing, probably punctuated by Victor Osimhen turning down 6 different offers from Al Hilal, other footballers rejecting them as well. Players in Dubai coming back to Europe, wasn't it, ahead of World Cup year at the same time? And maybe, and God bless Darwin, what a player, what an effort, gave us some magic moments. But I think it was quite telling that even for him, this was right at the end of the window, wasn't it, when all other options had been exhausted, like Napoli couldn't work, Atletico Madrid. It was kind of, Al Hilal or sit on the bench type of thing, wasn't it? So he made that move. But it was interesting because it wasn't really the money issue. They still drove truckloads of money up to players' houses and made those offers. But the shine on that new toy has well and truly gone, hasn't it? For players, for agents, that type of thing. No one is really looking to Saudi anymore. And I do just wonder, next summer, have their rulers just given up on it a little bit? Have they just lost interest? I think we'll stick with, the boxing, the golf, all that type of thing. That even, who their owners are, obviously, in the Premier League, they've not tried to buy it or be the disruptors at all, have they? They've just kind of settled in there a little bit. So, yeah, there is a real, for our transfer show, sense of disappointment. It's not really been anything Saudi-based to shout about at all.
Weirder still, given the Club World Cup thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure they would love to be building on this, and there's a World Cup. That was the idea, wasn't it? It was supposed to be this long, many years long project. But like you, I get the feeling that it's sort of gone to a lesser priority. Maybe they're seeing, well, we'll just buy our assets in the Premier League, like Newcastle type things, and see how that goes. Look, who knows? We're only speculating, but definitely a disappointment compared to what it had been in the past. And we should finish then with a reference to some of the Turkey stuff, because interesting that some business went on around there. Some big names now playing in that league. You've mentioned the Bashkans and their influence on several occasions. It's kind of an interesting thing because it feels like, I don't know, has that league got a little bit of cachet now?
It's funny, isn't it? And there's this article on screen, if anyone wants to read it, by James Benji. Did it for CBS about how finance in the modern world has just changed with Turkey. And as it says, Galatasaray and Fenerbahce can outspend Europe's big clubs because of real estate deals, the way debt works in Turkey, the Turkish lira, all sorts of things. But Victor Osimhen's ended up there. Leroy Sané's ended up there. Ederson's there, isn't he? Gundogan. These are big names in world football that have ended up in this league, absolutely being paid an absolute fortune at the same time. And it's funny because the Bashkans are mentioned in this article. There's a bit I love where it says, the Bashkans don't care about their club's future. They care about the here and now. They're presidents who are elected, and to stay elected, it doesn't matter about rocking up debt and then restructuring it. It's just about getting the players in. No one kind of profiles for the down the line in Turkey, which brings excitement for us like it has done. The only other thing to say on this is the Turkish window is still open apparently till the 12th of September, Trev. So they might maybe just make a few, you never know. And the one that apparently they've reached out over, do you remember Ademola Lookman, who's had a bit of a nightmare time at Atalanta and didn't get his move to Inter? They have reached out over him apparently at the same time. So yeah, they have brought the Bashkans, Turkish football, a bit of joy to us. I mean, Mourinho went at the same time as well. But the other thing to note, Big Ange has been linked with his job. So maybe he may end up there. And maybe if he looks and thinks, well, I've got a keeper like Ederson and others that are coming, maybe it looks attractive. So, yeah, Turkey are probably one of the biggest risers, if not the biggest riser this window in Europe.
Yeah, it's like there's been a little bit of a pivot. You can understand, right? If they can offer good money, they can also offer Champions League football. That's huge. Yeah. That's a huge thing for cachet and for player expectations and where they believe they are in their career. So yeah, it's absolutely one to watch. Look, man, it's so crammed with information as ever. I feel like there's loads more we could have talked about, but I think we've put a lot on the table there for people. It just feels as if we've kind of won this portion of the season for what it's worth. Now, of course, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, which will be the performance of these guys that we've bought. Let's see how they go. It's hard not to be very upbeat about it, though, Dave. It's hard not to be very optimistic when you see the likes of that beautiful bastard there in his new Liverpool kit, lining up alongside Florian Wirtz and Hugo Ekitike and Jeremy Frimpong and Kirkez. It's very exciting.
It's brilliant. It honestly is that, again, if you go back to what we thought it could be at the start of the window as to what it is now, it is just exciting. And even this season, as we've seen, we've been pretty bad in games at times, haven't we? We've not played well. That's a fair assessment. And we're already 9 for 9. And the rest of the Premier League is sat there thinking, shit, they've not even played that well and they're 9 for 9. What's actually going to happen when they click into gear, when Isak comes into the lineup as well? The Reds could just be winning it all. We'll just have to see this season.
Well, I would like to say thanks very much to you for compiling all this information for these shows over the summer since we've started doing it. It's always a joy to do it. We have good fun on the show, and there's lovely narratives that find their way all the way through all of the shows. So it's a great show to do. I can't wait, honestly, till the next window starts up. We'll probably do a sneaky one or two as stories drop, and there are a few already starting to drop. Like, for example, we could have talked about the story linking us today with a certain Bayern Munich player, but we'll save those kind of things for later. But as ever, man, just hats off for the industry in the background. I see some people acknowledged on Twitter today. It's nice to see that for all the effort that goes in, because there's a lot of talking that you do behind the scenes. A pleasure to do, and I look forward to our next window. Can't come soon enough, to be honest, buddy.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. Looking forward to see how it all pans out. It has been fun. There's been a bit of everything, a bit for everyone this summer. Roll on January, eh?
Thanks to everyone out there. Good luck.